Why should we pay for their security? Questions raised by British nationals as Prince Harry and Meghan return to the UK. Imagine this. Prince Harry leaves Britain, steps away from royal duties, moves to America, builds a private life thousands of miles away, and now, years later, he and Meghan are preparing to make Britain their home again. But there is one question that has immediately returned to the center of the debate. Who is going to pay for their security? For some British taxpayers, the answer seems obvious. Why should we? Harry and Meghan are returning as private individuals. They are not expected to resume their former roles as working royals. So why should ordinary taxpayers potentially contribute to protecting them? But there is another side to this story. Prince Harry says the threat against him has not disappeared simply because his royal duties changed. Security assessments have reportedly identified serious risks, and Harry has argued for years that private security cannot provide everything that armed UK police protection can provide. So today, we're asking the question that many people are debating. Should British taxpayers pay for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's security, or should Harry pay the bill himself? And the answer may not be as simple as it first appears. The news that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle intend to return to Britain has surprised many people. The couple are expected to live at a private, non-royal residence outside London, while their children, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, are expected to attend school in Britain. That means this isn't simply a short holiday. The Sussexes appear to be planning a much greater presence in the country. And immediately, an old problem has returned. Security. Harry's relationship with the British government over his protection has been extremely complicated. When he and Meghan stepped away from their roles as senior working royals in 2020, their automatic security arrangements changed. They subsequently moved to the United States, where they have personally funded private security. But Britain is different. Private security personnel do not have the same powers as armed British police officers. And that distinction has been at the heart of Harry's argument. For some members of the British public, however, the argument begins somewhere else. They ask, if Harry chose to leave royal duties, why should taxpayers be responsible for protecting him? After all, Britain has millions of ordinary families facing rising household costs. Taxpayers fund schools, hospitals, police services, emergency services, public infrastructure, and countless other government responsibilities. So some people understandably question whether public money should be used to protect a man who voluntarily stepped away from official royal duties. The criticism becomes even stronger because Harry and Meghan are not expected to return as working royals. They are returning as private citizens. That distinction matters, because if Harry is no longer performing official royal duties, critics argue that his personal security should largely be a personal responsibility. And this is where the debate becomes emotional. Some people see Harry as a member of the royal family who will always carry a unique security risk. Others see him as someone who made a personal decision to leave the institution, and therefore should accept the financial consequences of that decision. This is where the argument becomes more complicated. Harry may no longer be a working royal, but he hasn't stopped being a member of the royal family. He remains the son of King Charles III. He remains a globally recognized public figure. And he remains closely associated with the British monarchy. A security assessment reported by ITV News in July 2026 claimed that Harry faces an elevated terrorist threat while in Britain. The report reportedly identified several potential threats and argued that UK authorities are better positioned than private security to respond to certain serious attacks. That raises an important question. If there is a genuine security threat, should protection depend on whether the person is popular with the public? Imagine the threat assessment says someone is at serious risk. Should the government say, you are no longer a working royal, so you're on your own? Or should the decision be based purely on the level of danger? This is precisely why Harry's supporters say the debate should not be about whether people like him. It should be about security. Harry's position has been consistent for years. He has argued that Britain is his home and that he wants his children to know their father's country. But he has also argued that he cannot simply bring his family to Britain if he believes they cannot be adequately protected. During his legal battle over security, Harry argued that private protection could not fully replicate police protection in Britain. And there is an important distinction here. Private security can protect, but armed police have different powers and capabilities. That is why the security debate isn't simply, Harry wants bodyguards. It's more complicated than that. The question is whether Britain's security authorities believe Harry and his family require state protection, and if so, at what level. That decision is not supposed to be made by social media. It is not supposed to be decided by newspapers. And it is not supposed to be decided by whether the public loves or dislikes Harry. The decision belongs to the appropriate security authorities. So where does the British government currently stand? When asked about Harry and Meghan's security arrangements, Prime Minister Andy Burnham described the matter as private and declined to say whether taxpayers would fund their protection. That means one thing is clear. There is no simple public announcement saying that Harry and Meghan will automatically receive taxpayer-funded protection. Their security arrangements remain a matter for the relevant authorities. The Royal and VIP Executive Committee, known as RAVEC, plays a role in determining protective security arrangements for members of the royal family and other prominent individuals. Harry's security arrangements were downgraded after he stopped being a working royal. And in 2025, he lost his legal challenge over the decision. The Court of Appeal rejected his argument that he had been unfairly singled out and allowed the government's bespoke security arrangements to continue. So Harry doesn't simply have the legal right to demand unlimited taxpayer-funded protection. The level of protection is determined through a security assessment. And now we reach the part that has caught the attention of taxpayers. Reports have suggested that protecting Harry and Meghan could potentially cost millions of pounds a year. One recent report put a possible figure as high as £5 million annually. But it's extremely important to understand that this is a reported estimate, not an announced government bill. The actual cost would depend on the level of protection provided, how frequently protection is required, where the couple live, and what security assessment ultimately determines. So the question isn't necessarily, will Britain definitely spend £5 million on Harry? We don't know that. The real question is, if the government decides that police protection is necessary, who should bear the cost? And that's where British public opinion becomes divided. Supporters of state protection make a powerful argument. They say Harry's security isn't simply about protecting a wealthy celebrity. He's the son of the king. He's a high-profile member of the royal family. His public profile is connected to Britain. And according to security reporting, there are genuine threats against him. Supporters therefore argue that if British security agencies determine that he is at serious risk, the government should not ignore that risk simply because he stepped down from royal duties. There is another argument too. If Harry attends public events in Britain, the police may have to manage security regardless. So perhaps some of the cost exists whether or not Harry personally pays for protection. From this perspective, security isn't a privilege. It's a responsibility of the state when credible threats exist. But critics aren't convinced. They say Harry and Meghan made a deliberate decision to leave Britain. They stepped away from royal duties. They moved to America. They established their own private security arrangements. And they built a highly successful private life outside the UK. So critics ask, why should British taxpayers now be expected to pay? And there is another concern. If Harry receives special taxpayer-funded protection despite no longer being a working royal, could that create an unfair precedent? What about other wealthy public figures facing threats? What about former politicians? What about celebrities? What about other members of prominent families? Where does the government draw the line? That is why some British taxpayers believe Harry should simply pay for his own protection. Their argument is straightforward. If you can afford to live privately, you can afford to pay privately for your security. There is an important detail often missing from the debate. During his previous legal dispute, Harry's representatives said he had offered to personally pay for police protection. A court document records Harry's position that he had offered to cover the cost of security rather than impose the expense on British taxpayers. But there is a complication. Harry cannot simply hire private guards and give them the same powers as British armed police. His private security team does not have the same legal authority or capabilities as UK police. So even if Harry is willing to pay, the government still has to decide what level of state protection is appropriate. And that's why the argument isn't simply about money. It is also about authority, risk, and public responsibility. Perhaps the most interesting part of this entire story is that Harry's return has reopened questions that many people thought had been settled years ago. Harry and Meghan left Britain. They built a new life in America. They criticized aspects of the royal family and the institution. Harry fought a long legal battle over security. And now they are returning. That naturally raises questions. Has something changed? Does Harry now feel safer in Britain? Has his attitude towards the country changed? Does he want his children to grow up with a stronger connection to Britain? And perhaps most importantly, does returning home also mean accepting the responsibilities that come with being connected to the British royal family? Perhaps the fairest answer is somewhere in the middle. Security should not be determined by popularity. If intelligence agencies determine that Harry faces a serious threat, that threat should be taken seriously. At the same time, taxpayers have every right to ask how public money is being spent. There should be a clear distinction between security that is genuinely necessary because of a credible threat, and security that could simply be considered a royal privilege. And perhaps the best solution would be a carefully reviewed, limited arrangement. In fact, some former UK Home Secretaries have recently argued for a temporary or limited level of taxpayer-funded protection, subject to regular reassessment. That approach could potentially satisfy both sides. Protect Harry when the threat requires it, but don't automatically give him permanent protection simply because of his title. So we come back to the question, why should we pay for their security? It's a legitimate question, but there is another legitimate question. If a credible threat exists, can Britain afford not to protect the son of the king? Maybe the answer isn't about Harry. Maybe it's about how Britain decides who deserves state protection. Should it depend on royal status? Should it depend on public service? Should it depend entirely on threat level? Or should wealthy private citizens be expected to fund their own protection whenever possible? As Harry and Meghan prepare to build a new chapter of their lives in Britain, the security debate is unlikely to disappear. And this time, the British public will be watching closely. Because whatever decision is eventually made, one thing is certain. The question of who pays for Harry's security is no longer just a royal family story. It is a taxpayer question. It is a security question. And ultimately, it is a question about what Britain believes it owes to a prince who chose to step away from royal life, but who is now choosing to come home. What do you think? Should Prince Harry receive taxpayer-funded security if British authorities determine that he faces a serious threat? Or should Harry and Meghan pay for their own protection? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more updates and deeper discussions about Harry, Meghan and the British royal family, make sure you subscribe. Because this royal story is far from over.